Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Rafael Morales, who is award-winning musician for SOJA. Rafa,
Hi
welcome to the
there.
show.
Hi, Paul. Thanks
How
for
you
having me here.
Oh, come on, man. The pleasure is ours. We are excited to hear from you and hear about your story. I know that I definitely, and I know that the listeners definitely want to know a lot about this Grammy Award winning, achievement that you have. But before we even get into that, we need to know a little bit about yourself and like how you started off. But like, tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from.
Well, my name is Rafael Rodriguez Morales, and I'm a musician from the island of Puerto Rico. I play the trumpet for a reggae band that's called SOJA. And I mean, I've been a musician since I'm 9 years old. That I started trumpet in school. So, I mean, I'm 41 now. So imagine I've been playing the trumpet for a long time now. And I'm, let's say, a successful story of the band program, from the schools in Puerto Rico, like all other musicians all over the world that came from that same program. And you know what I can tell you all myself? I have a beautiful wife and 2 kids, and a loving family, extended family in the U.S. and in Puerto Rico. And I'm one of those person that can say that can live from the music. Like I study music like formally in the conservatory in Puerto Rico. And I don't know what else I can tell you from
Now,
myself. I don't know.
So, well, first off, thank you for breaking that down for us right there. Now, I know that you said you grew up in Puerto Rico. Could you tell us a little bit about Puerto Rico? I know some of the listeners are probably saying, like, where is it located? Could you talk about even like the culture of Puerto Rico growing up?
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, Puerto Rico, or Puerto Rico, like you say in
That's right.
Spanish. Yeah, Puerto Rico. We're island in the Caribbean. We're next to Cuba and Dominican Republic and Haiti, and we are like the smallest of the major Antilles, and the biggest of the minor Antilles. So we got a big culture mix. We have the mix of Africa and Spain, and then the mix with the US too. But culturally, we are big in our music heritage, our food heritage, and also, we are like I feel like it's very family oriented, the island, and I don't know if any of our listeners has been the Caribbean, but you know how the Caribbean is. It's like the food, the music, it's warm.
Yes, the beaches. You are right. The Puerto Rican, well, the Latin community, I want to say, is very big on family oriented. So I can only imagine what it was like in the household, growing up. Was anyone else a musician growing up?
Well, actually, I was the only musician in my household, but let's say my first experience with music, it was through my parents. they are members of a church in Puerto Rico, and they sing at the church. So that's so I when I was very very young, I will go to the rehearsals and like just play around on church, and I could listen the rehearsals and everybody singing and all that. But I'm the first one that formally educated in music.
Okay. Now, could you tell us a little bit about that? Like, so what did you want to be when you were growing up? Could you said you started at 9. So at the early
Yeah.
age, were you thinking of being a musician, or was there something else you were looking to pursue?
Well, the thing when you start music that young, you don't really thinking about a career itself. You're thinking of having fun, and like the definition of playing music in English comes from the word play, to play, have fun, like you're playing any other stuff. You know, in Spanish, it doesn't have the same definition, but it will be like to touch the music. But I make that clear because I think it's very accurate how you guys say to play music, because when you're young, you just enjoy it, you just have fun, and I never thought until I was older, let's say teenager, or almost until I got to college, that I really wanted to pursue like a touring, career. Like I can say all my childhood and up to senior in high school, I think I never thought about or other than having fun and enjoying the music itself. Then when it's time to decide, oh, are you going to college and all that type of stuff, then I
Now,
knew somehow I want to be a musician.
and get that opportunity to tour and actually see if you could be open up, like obviously make it a profession. So one of the biggest things that, when we're talking to a lot of the guests on the show, a lot of the immigrant parents are always looking like for stability for their children, right? Growing up in Puerto Rico, then trying to pursue being a musician, like what did your parents feel at first? Was it something like they were like trying to like steer you in a different direction, or was it something where they were very supportive?
No, I think my parents were very understanding of. They always said to me, whatever you're gonna do, you're gonna finish, start and finish. Doesn't matter what you want to do, just choose what you want to do and just go for it. And other thing is like I didn't mention this, but my mother uncle, he's a famous composer in Puerto Rico. So from my mother's side, I have the music, in the heritage of her family from the Morales and Morales Estrada, which is like this famous song in Puerto Rico, let's say in the repertoire of music, of like traditional music. It's called En Mi Viejo San Juan, which is like a song that my great uncle composed for his brother when he was on the war, and it talks about San Juan and how things that you will miss from being there and wanting to go back. So going back to what we we're saying, I think my parents always felt that there was always a possibility for me to be a musician, because they knew that there was something in the family and I was the first one from this generation. So I think they were very, like they
That's
understanding.
the fact that there was somebody in the family just doing something, like obviously when you bring this information to your parents, you're like, look, and I've a lot of the guests on the show have said like their parents are like, oh, I need you to be a doctor, a lawyer, or something along those lines. But I'm very happy to know that your parents are very supportive. And you said something very important, when you start something you finish, and I think a lot of the especially the Caribbean culture is very like adamant on like following through and making that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Talk a little bit about the music culture in Puerto Rico. Well, Puerto Rico. I want to know a little bit about the genres of music that has arrived from it. I know it's influenced by a lot of other cultures. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, talk about the music in Puerto Rico. There's traditional music. Well, we could start with like bomba and plena, which is like bomba was the music like any other place that was culturally merged with the African culture and the slaves. It creates a form of communications within them, because when the slaves came here, there was a lot of them were from different tribes and different places, so they didn't really sometimes even speak the same language, but they have a way of communicating through music, and this is the music, specifically the bomba, was the music that the slaves will use for recreational purposes, and slash even talk about what was happening, or like free themselves with through dance and through the drums, uh, and that I would say is maybe the oldest tradition of music, which is called the bomba, and it's played with tambores.
Oh yes, I'm familiar with that.
They were, yeah, it's particularly similar to any other music in the Caribbean, or even in the US, where have like drums and they used to play it, and they have a dance to it. Sometimes they will like organize themselves through doing those songs. If they were gonna rebel or something, they will make songs to hide it, so the masters or the
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or the will not really understand what was happening,
Mm-hmm.
and from there we go to the mountains, where it's like the música típica, which is like the mixture of the Spaniards and the Africans, and when a lot of slaves ran away to the mountains, they created another breed, if I might say, another breed of Puerto Rican that was from the mountain, and then they have their own other music, which is called well, música típica. It have like the different sizes, which is like a like a type of music that they play with a cuatro. Cuatro is a Puerto Rican, one of the Puerto Rican national instruments, which is a 10 double string guitar with metal string, and it sounds very particular. Kind of like almost like a hybrid between, I don't know, maybe like a little like a banjo or mandolin, kind of the different.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, those are the two types of root for music, in my opinion. And then from there comes the plena too, which plena, it was more like a way of telling the news and the stories to the people, to the average Joe. These plenas talk about different events. Let's say when the Pope came to visit for the first time, there was a plena that talk about when he was visiting the obispo. Not the Pope, sorry, the obispo, which is like a bishop. The first time the bishop was visiting, and then when a hurricane came, they have a song about the hurricane. So it's very similar to the gospel, the roots of the gospel in the U.S. Those songs
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that
Yes.
will tell stories our things. So it's got the same root, but then they do it with a little panderos, which like panderos are like a little like a tambourines without the metal little things. I don't know how to explain it in English. I'm trying to get all those concepts.
You breaking it down. Like this is something this is something new to me. Even when I think about the culture and there's obviously there's a lot of the mainstream stuff, but you're going down into some deep history.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was going to yes, exactly to the beginning because after that the salsa, everybody knows the salsa.
Yes, the salsa, merengue, bachata.
Yeah, all the stuff like
reggaeton and tembo.
And then reggaeton, yeah, and then reggaeton and all that, and we can come now to what is música urbana, which is the latest, like Bad Bunny,
yes.
all that type of. That's where we are now, but all come from all that past.
Well, I'm glad you were able to break that down. I know a lot of the listeners, even if they are not of the Latin culture, are very appreciative for understanding, where something starts from and, where it is currently today. Now, I know obviously as a musician, you're probably playing several different instruments. Could you tell us about the instruments that you do play or have played, and like what instrument did you like gravitate to the most?
Well, I'm considering myself a professional trumpet player, and that's my main instrument that I can say I play professionally, because there's a lot of weight to say that you play an instrument professionally. I study classical composing, so in my learning years of school, I have to learn pretty much all the instruments to learn how to write for them. So I have the basics of pretty much all the instruments of the classical orchestra. And for educational purposes, when I had a minor in education, so I have to learn how to teach those instruments. So I'll say my main instrument is the trumpet. My secondary instrument is the piano, because I use it for composing and for guidance. The piano is the most complete instrument we have, which have all the realms of the music there visually. You can see it all. So I know I in order to write for instruments in like the conservatory, like in the school, you have to learn how the instruments function. You cannot write something that cannot be done, so you have to learn them. But I don't consider myself, I'm gonna do a gig with a violin or a gig with
you have the ability
I mean?
but you know your limits. You're like, I'm more focused on this, right? And as you get older, in a sense of like the understanding the profession, your business, and being a musician, you start to have strong clarity on like what instruments like really gravitate to you, and those are the ones you're more passionate about. So I could only imagine what the music sounds like when you got a trumpet in your hand.
Yeah, it's something like it's extension of me. I see it that way. It's been so much years, so it's an extension.
When you were growing up, you grew up in Puerto Rico, then you came over here to the U.S., right? But like, who were like some of the artists that you looked up to, and why?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I was introduced to music, like I said, through church, right? So my first interaction with music itself was listening to some gospel music and like church music. After that, which is kind of like, I won't say the word generic, but there's a lot of artists that will interpret or perform same different songs that are like the repertoire of the church. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I learned, that's the first stuff that I learned, like those songs and all that. But the first mainstream artist that I really was listening to his albums, there is two. It's like a rap performer from Puerto Rico. It's called Bico C, BICO/C, Bico C. And in the '90s, early '90s, he was like the one of the first ones that was like doing rap here in Spanish in Puerto Rico. So I remember that was the first album I asked my dad, like, hey, can I have this for Christmas? And then from there, one day I remember my elder sister, she came home with this CD set from the Bob Marley, all the Bob Marley songs and albums. It was like a big kind of like a book, and it have like 10 different CDs inside. And the first time I heard Bob Marley, like my life changed for good. Like I fell in love with that music, that sound in particular, you know. And then from there, when I start studying trumpet, I learned all Miles Davis, and that was one of my first jazz artists that I listened to, Miles. And then from there, I became like a jazz head, dude. Like all my life up to when I finished college and I started touring with this reggae band, I was just I would listen to jazz and classical music, like like for the normal average, not average, because I wouldn't say average, but for all my friends and stuff that were not really into that, sometimes it was like boring for them. But I would sit down and listen to classical music. I would go to the library and look for the scores and like listen to the music and follow the scores of these classical pieces or the jazz. I don't know if you guys remember. There was this store called Borders, which have like books and CDs.
Mm-hmm. That was the
I will
spot.
go. Yeah, dude. I will go every week religiously and buy one CD like jazz or classical, and then I build like a big collection. I remember.
You
So I feel
mentioned.
I yeah.
I was gonna say you mentioned some big artists right there. And you said Bob Marley, who was definitely a big influence on a lot of musicians and artists in general. And then obviously you said
Mhm.
Miles. So the fact that you were something that I'm listening to and I'm understanding is that your versatility of the music that you listen to has helped molded you in a sense in your career. Like obviously you're a
Yeah,
composer as well, but you have taken it upon yourself to kind of listen to different styles of music and appreciate other styles in order to make you the musician that you are today. Is that correct?
yeah, that's correct. And then I'll say in 2008 or so is when I really found like pop music.
Mm-hmm.
All before that, it was just like classical and like jazz and all this. And then I found pop and hip hop and all this other music from US that I was not really exposed to it. Because here, like I forgot to say that here everybody's exposed to salsa, to all the salsa artists, like and merengue artists. That's like what you really listen every day, all around, everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So those you don't really count as because you're listening to them all the time. So that's kind of like a background that you listen always, so you have it there. When you that's why a lot of Puerto Rican musicians are so versatile, in different genders of music because the mixture of all this music together here in the island is very big. Now, these days, in the 2022, there's way more influence on the US pop music here in the island. In my time, you wouldn't listen unless you look for it. So when I go to the US in 2008, I get I get immersed on all this US pop culture, and then I started learning about it.
Mm-hmm. Now, what were some of the artists that you were able to work with in the past on this journey that you've been on?
Well, I work with a lot of local artists here in Puerto Rico. Then then I have the opportunity when I first have the opportunity with SOJA to leave the island and go tour the world. we start seeing and sharing stage with a lot of musicians. Like, you know, I could tell you, let's see, I remember we shared stage with let's say Black Eyed Peas, Kanye, um, Snoop Dogg, uh, to say some other artists. Let me see what.
Mm-hmm. Now you mentioned
Like,
some big names right there.
yeah, but talking about influence, I'm very influenced by Dave Matthews, because we tour with them, and seeing how dedicated they are, and how they take the music business to a next level, is something that you can only experience seeing it. You know, like I got so much respect for Dave and for all the band. You know, like the level of expertise and the level of professionality or professionalism
Yes.
is
The band. I mean, that
yeah.
separates. That's going to separate a lot of people in the game. You know, when you say I'm a musician, or I'm a professional musician, or I'm a dancer, I'm a professional dancer, it obviously makes a big difference. Now, being a part of the band that you are, SOJA, like I know that's a major accomplishment. I know that obviously coming up from where you were, you know, telling your parents like this is what I want to do. Now being a part of SOJA in a sense, now you have kind of achieved something of what you've been looking for as a child. Now, could you tell us a little bit more about how you got started with the band? Like, I mean, Puerto Rico
Yeah,
to then doing this. Like,
very
how did that
interesting.
even come? Yeah. How did that come about?
Well, at that time, we're talking about maybe 2006 or so. I was doing a lot of freelance stuff for different artists that would come here, or like local artists, like a bunch of different genders of music or styles of music. And I was I was in my, I think I was almost finishing college of music school, and one of my friends that I play in a with a reggae band here in Puerto Rico, a local reggae band. He called me and said like, "Hey, there's this band that needs a trumpet player. Like, they don't have a trumpet player. Uh, can you do the show with me?" And it's like, "Oh, of course, awesome." So I go there, and what we call in the music industry, or the musicians will call at first sight reading, which is like where they give you music and you read it at the moment that they give the music to you, and then you play it. You know what I mean? Like, there's two different styles of to work with musicians. It could be like they send you the music and you learn it by memory, or they give you the music and you read it. So this time it was reading. So we went to sound check, pass through the whole songs, reading them, and then we do the show. So the chemic was so good with everybody that from there that day we got in touch, and then they started calling me to do some recordings, and then from there we, like a year later, we're like, all right, let's go on tour. And that was the first time that I went like on long term tours. You know, I remember starting in Hawaii. The first time I went to Hawaii.
So you've been able to travel around the world doing this now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, I know there's obviously some similarities within the music that you're playing, right? But like, what was like some of the challenges, you know, adapting to that type of music?
Well, locally for me, I I came from playing a couple of years before reggae music, so I was already comfortable with that type of music and stuff. But the challenges for me were others. Were it was more like day to day challenges of, you know, traveling. You know, like being exposed to a lot of stuff that I never seen before. You know, in, and then all other things. It was like, you know, you play long shows every night. So when you start as a rookie, you don't really have that sense of but you just think like you can do everything. So when you do 5 shows in a row, like 2-hour shows in a row every night, and then you don't really prepare yourself physically to it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
can take a toll on you. So that's, stuff that I learned on the way, but I would say like the most challenging things were like just to coexist in a touring environment, which is something different than normal music. Like normally a musician will go play a show, finish the show, and go back home and rest or whatever. When you're on the road, it's a different whole concept.
Now, that is something very important to take in. I know the listeners that are young aspiring musicians, knowing that you have to mentally prepare yourself for something like this. It's not just based off of talent. Everyone is talented, but it's how do you stay in the game? It's the longevity of it all. Physically being in shape, mentally being in shape. Just being very centered and grounded within yourself. There's a lot of roads you could take on your way
exactly.
to down this path, and it's sometimes hard to kind of stay on task, or even like you said, you got to know like this is how much I could chew off right now. Like you said, as a rookie, you come in there like, oh, I could do everything, I'm Superman. But then slowly but surely you start to realize that you're tired, or you're affecting your production with the team, and that's how people kind of lose out on an opportunity based off of that. So I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, because sometimes people think, well, I just get this audition, I get booked, and I'm ready to go on tour. But there's so much more to it than just that. When you were traveling, I know you mentioned there was a lot of that kind of some of those obstacles. Was there any other obstacles you faced in regards to like the language barrier, traveling, learning other cultures?
I would say from the beginning, like, here in Puerto Rico, you get a good share of English. You get English in school since you're pretty much since kindergarten. So you learn, you have the basic stuff, but conversational English is a way different stuff. When you really immerse in the US, and then it's not everything textbook. It's like slang. There's like ways of saying stuff. So those first 2 years being in the US completely, it was a little difficult for me at first to really be fluent and understand everything. It was like the barrier was there for the language barrier.
And things are coming at you fast too, so it's very hard to kind of like process sometimes.
Yeah, and on top of that, if you're touring to different parts of the world, then you have that other barrier of going to places that you don't really speak the language either. So there's that too.
And that does cause a lot of frustration, especially when you're on a tour, and say you don't have that close relationship with your team because you're building it, so it's kind of hard sometimes. Some of these things you got to like face on your own, and it does get a little challenging and stuff. Now, when you were on tour, you visited several different places. You went all around the world, right? Could you tell us like, some of the most beautiful places you have visited, and like, did you ever feel like you would ever be doing that?
Well, let's say one that I never thought that I was gonna be was in Japan, and we toured to Japan. But one of the most beautiful places. Other than the Pacific Islands are beautiful, but New Caledonia is like a special place. We went there, and we received, when the reception there was like, it's like we were like amazed about how everybody treat us. They took us to the kind of like, we went kind of like to these people that lives in the countryside, and there was like I'd say like maybe like a bush doctor that would like took out all our, in our understanding, he was kind of like doing a ritual where like blessing the space and all that. But experiencing all that culturally was like, for me, I always stay with that in my mind. Like it's a good memory of visiting New Caledonia and seeing all this how the people treat us and all that. We also have a lot of love. Sorry, to interrupt you. We have a lot of love for Brazil. Like
Brazil is definitely another place where it's the music culture is just like on another level.
Yeah,
the love people have in Brazil, and you talked about it growing up in Puerto Rico. You said that one of the key things that you could remember of your childhood was just like that family, that community, right? So it seems that like in certain places, the places that like gravitated to you the most were the ones that showed that love, that same thing. So it shows a little similarity from you being a child to where you are currently right now.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it.
Now, the big thing right now that I definitely want to kind of dive into is just the fact that you won Best Reggae Album at the Grammys. Like that right there is massive. The Grammys, like this is where every musician, in a sense, would want to be, even if they got an opportunity to walk the red carpet, right? But to have the opportunity to kind of be acknowledged, let alone win, best album, best artist, or best single of the year, like at the Grammys. Like, could you explain a little bit to the listeners, like what was that process like and that experience being there and actually hearing that you were going to be going up and receiving?
Yeah, no, that was I cannot. It's hard to explain how you feel when when they call your name and like your band or where you have put so much hard work into it, and because it's always like I don't know, it's like everybody's very nervous, and because they always say and the Grammy goes too, and then you like that's our to be honest, this is the third time we've been nominated for a Grammy. So we've been there, sit down in that same seat for two times before that, and I remember the first time, like it's like you're all nervous, and then it's like, well, it's not your name, and you're like, you know what, this experience is amazing, and you're very grateful, and then you get nominated again, and you're like, oh my god, this is so amazing, and then another artist wins, so you're like, oh, that's good, that's great, having the opportunity again. But this third time, we were like, oh my god, like what if the third time it is the charm? And this time in particular, I was not even thinking about anything in particular. But when they call us, we all freak out and scream and like your heart is pounding really hard, and you stand up there, and then you have to, there's a mic there, and like no, you kind of freeze. You don't know what to say. Like you've been thinking all this in your mind all these times, and yeah, I'm gonna say this and that, but when time comes, you're like, it's not the same. It's harder than playing for thousands of people. It's like you get all nervous.
Yeah, it's a different type of playing at that point in time. You got, and the thing about that as well too is that people around the world are watching, right? It's
Right.
not just the people that are in the venue or in the arena watching you at that point in time. We're talking about people around the world. Stuff like this goes on the various different social media platforms, websites. It's everywhere, and you guys are like going down in history. So that's
No, yeah,
that's massive. I mean,
it's massive. It's amazing, and the whole experience, like when you win and they take you back to this whole world that's like backstage that only like the big artists are exposed to. All these interviews and all this.
Did, did you? How was the reaction when you went back home? Like, talk about that. Like, you won the Grammys. I'm assuming at some point in time you had to go back home. Like when you were embraced by the family. How was that?
Yeah, no, it was crazy. That same day. I mean, I got a video of my kids. Yeah, I have a 1.5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old. They were all like, "Oh, Papa is in the TV," like all my parents, my auntie, my uncle, everybody, was was seeing me and my wife, because she obviously came with me to the ceremony. So it was,
Mm-hmm.
and it's experience that I'm glad that I can give to my partner, that kind of experience, that she can be there and
That's very
see,
supportive. I like that. I like that. You could have taken
like, because
anybody.
no, I mean, she being there for me all this time, so it's a good way of showing, like, oh, so this all we work for, give us some good fruits. You know what I mean?
Mhm. It's good to have a partner that that's very supportive. I mean, obviously, you want your family members to be, but to have a partner that's very supportive in your career path, and especially with you being on tour, having kids, like it's definitely could be pulled in several different ways. But you guys have managed
Yeah.
to do that, and giving her the opportunity to come in with you, was obviously, I could just imagine what it was like. Your partner being in, like, oh my gosh, that's his name. He's going up. It's just the liveliness of that. Now, you mentioned that giving that experience to your partner, but like let's think about like some of those listeners right now. Like, what is like some words of advice you would give to like some of those immigrant early starting off musicians, trying to find their way into the industry? Is there something you could kind of like word of advice you could give to them to kind of help them stay on the right path?
Yeah. First of all, I will I will say, you practice, when you're young and you have the time, practice all you can. Like, whatever's what you're doing, like what you choose to do, if it's playing an instrument or producing or composing or whatever it is, make sure you put a lot of time now that you're young, so you can perfect your craft. That's the most important thing, I will say, because if I have that knowledge that I have now when I was younger, I will have approached it even more seriously, the practice, because there's a time that when you put time on the practice and trying to perfect everything, and then, like, when you go to the real world, to the real industry, you have so much skills, and you're so, like, aligned with your with your craft, that it will like open way more doors for you. That's the first thing I will want to approach. It's very important
Mhm.
in the music. It's very important to practice whatever you're doing. The only way you can perfect your craft is to doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it again.
Yeah, I always tell people consistency leads to victory. So you were very consistent at the age of 9 to where you are right now. You said 41, right? Still constantly picking up various different instruments, still training, still, wherever you are, whether it's an experience of performing or an opportunity to receive an award, you're taking in that information and you're paying attention to your surroundings. You're not just like, okay, I'm here to play and I'm out. It's more like, I'm here to play. Let me figure out how to be the best version of me on that stage
Yeah.
or at that venue. And then you reflect on it and you go back and you do it again. And I think you've learned a lot over the many years, and it shows in your career, because if you didn't make some of those changes, you probably wouldn't be where you are currently today. But because you were a really good student and you were able to be molded and kind of a chameleon in the industry, adapting when you can, it gotten you this far. So congratulations on that. And again, congratulations on the Grammy, because it's an honor to even have someone like yourself on our Zaka platform sharing that story, because that is, like I said, like something at this very highest caliber. Like, now the Grammys was massive, 9 years
Yes.
old, Grammys now. Like, what's next for you? Like, what's the next big achievement that you're looking to do?
Well, I got something that I want to do. I want to release my own instrumental music, and maybe some collaborations with some singers. I want to do like my own, release my own music, like all these my ideas and all that stuff, like from the instrumental point of view. Like I love reggae and I love what I do, but I would like to do that. That's one thing that I always have on my bucket list to do some instrumental music, my own music, and
Okay.
release album.
Okay. Well, that's big, right? I know you probably already in the works of doing that. You don't seem like the person who would sit on it. So, good luck with that. I know that that's going to be a very big undertaking on top of all the other things you got going on. But I know that the listeners and even myself are looking forward to when you do drop that album, or drop that music that you're going to
Yeah,
be putting
no,
out.
I'll let you guys. I'll let you guys know. I'll come back I'll come back for the podcast and
Appreciate
show you the
appreciate.
music.
Well, Rafa, thank you so much for just being a part of our show today, and it's kind of just expressing your journey, your story. I know, from the age of 9, having that mindset to be a better version of yourself, seeing yourself, fast forward into like, okay, by the age of this age, 20, 30, 40, whatever, I am going to achieve this. So to have that at the young age, it speaks character, volumes to the person that you are. And especially with the resources that you had as well, going to the right schooling, like I mentioned before,
Mhm.
you put your schooling first and your education first, and it's despite maybe the challenges that you might have had along the journey, like you still remained uh very in tune and very direct with what you want in life. And I'm very blessed to have heard you share that story about how you went to the Grammys 3 times in a row, to sit at the same table or chairs or whatever it was that you were in, the same arena, and know that the first one, okay, you didn't get it. Okay, I totally get it. The second one, you're right, you get there and you don't get it again. You're like, but when is my opportunity? When am I going to get it?
Right.
But you said the last one you went to, you said, I wasn't even thinking about it. I'm just happy to be in the spot with everybody else and to share this moment. And right when you weren't thinking about it, it happened. And I think a lot of those blessings that are going to come in our lives are going to come from us not even knowing that's going to be there. So thank you
Yeah.
for sharing that. Any
I
last?
wanted. Yeah, I wanted to say something. I wanna inspire all these any new up and coming musician, or doesn't even have to be a musician. Anyone that's like really uh, trying to their own thing, like never give up. That's the most important thing. Never give up. Keep trying. Practice the stuff that you wanna do, and keep practice make perfection. Also, we live in a world that have a lot of social media and a lot of connections with the whole world. Like for the new generation, use that tool. That's very important. Like when I was growing up, I didn't have any of that stuff that, that will give you opportunities. Just try to learn everything and be patient, but keep your mindset on your price, your mindset on what you're gonna do, and it will happen. Just keep the faith.
Mhm. Well, Rafa, thank you again for being a part of the show. We look forward to hearing more about your journey. And to the listeners, if you want to hear about more stories like Rafa, check us out on ZakaConnect.com or follow our feed Zaka wherever you listen to your podcast. Rafa, thank you again.
Well, thank you for having me here.